Welcome to the Alternatives Pregnancy Center podcast. We are pro-gospel, pro-woman, and pro-life. Thanks for listening. Well, Lisa, welcome to Alternatives Pregnancy Center's podcast, where we are all about telling the stories of the lives that not only have been changed here at Alternatives through our medical services, but you are unique in that God brought you to us through a tour. Yes, and so thank you for being with us, and thank you for being willing to share why this ministry means so much to you.
My pleasure.
So right out of the gate, why don't you begin to share how you and I met and what transpired after that?
Okay. I am on the board of our church, and the woman that was the liaison between our church and Alternatives, because we're a strong partner with Alternatives at our church, was going off the board, and so I was asked if I would take over that position as the liaison. So I accepted that and came on a tour. And I personally have had an abortion when I was 19 years old. That was 45 years ago, if you can do the math. And it was very eye-opening to me. I really feel that a lot of people don't know what abortion really is. It's almost like 1 minute you're pregnant and then the next minute you're not. But how did that happen? What's the process? And that tour was pretty life-changing for me, so much to the point I went home and told my husband, David, I said, I really need you to go on this tour and see what I saw and heard, because I don't think I have the capacity to be able to share all that with you. It's a lot. So that was at our old clinic, and you and I just happened to end up outside together at the same time after the tour, and I was a little emotional from what I had just seen and heard, and you were a little emotional because you had indicated just a lot going on here and a lot over the weekend at your husband's church where he's the senior pastor. And we both were a little teary-eyed, and it was just something that God used to bring us together. So from that point, we had coffee a couple of times and lunch, and just kind of were building our friendship and relationship. And at one point, you said, "Boy, I'd love to have you, come work at Alternatives." And I looked at you quite honestly and said, "I don't know how to do that. I work in corporate America, and all the things somewhat maybe." I shouldn't admit, but I make six figures, Heidi. How do I do that? I didn't know how to do that. And so we both just kind of agreed at that point we would just continue to pray and see if that's what God had for you and for me, if the doors would be opened or closed. And we just kind of kept doing that. And that, when we first met, was October of 21. So in January of 22, you really kind of became more formal with an offer, like, I'd like you to come and be our director of donor relations.
Please come.
Please come. And I had been thinking about it and praying about it, and my husband as well. And so we decided, instead of it being a yes or a no, what if I just came for a day a week for 4 or 5 hours a day to just kind of begin to understand the ministry and get a feel for it, to see if that's what God had for me. I've had some things in my life of pretty high degree, that God has brought me through. And quite frankly, I never thought God would use me in this area of abortion. I thought it would be something else that I had walked through in my life. So that was a little bit of a surprise to me, because that was winding all the way back. But that's what God does, as we know. So I started coming in around March or April, I think, on a Tuesday, and I was going to be here 4 or 5 hours a day. And my husband and I decided we would give it to the end of 2022 before we made a decision and really decide if this was something that was going to be another step for me. So, and at that time working in corporate America. So I came home after about a month. I would go home some days in tears and just say to my husband, I don't know how to balance this. I go there for a day, 4 or 5 hours. I haven't been there in a week, so there's a whole lot that went on in the last week since I was last there. And then tomorrow I'm going to go sell flooring, which is what I did for, a 25, 30-year career for a major manufacturer. And I said, I don't know how to do that. That just seems, 1 minute we're talking about trying to save babies' lives and the sanctity of human life, and the next day we're talking about selling flooring. I said, that's just really hard for me. So he, just said, let's just kind of take our time. We got on the phone with some very good friends on a Zoom meeting that, seeking wise counsel. Brian, our friend, had left corporate America to begin a men's ministry himself. So we thought they would be good to talk to in that regard. And we thought, well, maybe we'll look at the end of June. We'll just see, push it up a little bit. We were just kind of seeing where the Lord led us. But then around March or April, I started noticing that I was having a difficult time walking. I was born with spina bifida and have, for the most part, by God's grace, lived a relatively normal life. I didn't have the most severe form of it, but I do have some nerve damage and whatnot throughout my feet and my legs. And I just started noticing that my gait was feeling different, and the sensation in my feet was feeling different. And after about, I don't know, it was about maybe 6-8 weeks, I think maybe around June, I said, I'm not sure I can keep doing this. I was even having a difficult time doing my job with my company, far less coming and doing that. So you said you had noticed it too. You were saying you're walking differently, and people were noticing. And so that's when we set out on this journey to try to understand what was going on. My company had a program that for more critical health issues, not your typical cold and flu, they can help you get connected with specialists and doctors and whatnot. So I reached out to them, and the first stop that they sent us, well, actually, I take that back. My chiropractor did an MRI of my low back, or had one ordered, and they found that my spinal cord was tethered, and there's a strong possibility it could have been like that for years. Nobody's going to ever really know the answer to that. So that was step one. And he said, well, I'd like to refer you to a neurosurgeon at Sutter. And so Dave and I met with him. Super nice guy, great doctor. But he said, complicated cases like you, I tend to refer to a doctor, a pediatric neurosurgeon at UC Davis. So I said, well, if you've looked at me lately, I'm not your typical pediatric patient, but okay. So we didn't disregard it. We just kind of put it over here for the minute because we were seeing, a spine surgeon and other doctors and neurologists, that kind of thing. So we just kind of put that on the side for the moment. So I saw a neurologist. We saw a spine surgeon at UC Davis. He did an MRI of my mid-back and upper back to make sure there wasn't anything going on up there, and that was all stable. And he said, for the most part, I'm a spine surgeon, so your spine, even for all you've been through, is relatively stable. There's nothing I can really do medically to care for you, but I would like you to see a neurosurgeon, and I'd like you to it's a female neurosurgeon. He said she's a pediatric neurosurgeon, so here the name was once again put in front of us. So we looked at each other and said, okay, Lord, you're obviously trying to tell us something. This is someone you want us to spend some time with and have her take a look at what's going on. So we made an appointment to go see her. And her first thought, she said, her first thought was, I want you to go have a CAT scan of your brain, which is a little unnerving, but okay. And I remember that day going. It was at a kind of a mobile UC Davis scan trailer kind of over in the Arden area. And, I parked my car like here, and the trailer was here, and I could hardly walk from point A to point B. The tech came out and helped me. Driving was fine because I was I was stable, but walking was the problem. So he helped me walk in and get on the table for the CT scan and help me walk out. It was kind of crazy. So when we went to see her, she said, for the results, she said, even though your spinal cord is tethered, we now see that there's a situation in your brain, and it's called obstructed hydrocephalus. So now I kind of understood why they wanted me to see a pediatric neurosurgeon, because hydrocephalus is most often related to pediatric care, to babies, to small children. Some babies that are born with spina bifida have hydrocephalus. So again, we don't really know how long that had been there. I mean, it was presenting itself now, but was this developing for years? We don't really know. So she really wasn't excited the first visit about operating on my spine, the tethered part, because she said, I don't want to leave you worse than you are. And I'm not 100% sure that's what's wrong. And that's when she sent me for the CAT scan. So the second visit, we were talking about the results. She said, I can work with this. She said, we can go in and, she said, I don't want to put a shunt in your brain because shunts are kind of older technology. They can underdrain, overdrain. It's just not my choice for this type of situation. So she recommended a surgery called an ETV, which is, see if I can remember, endoscopic third ventriculostomy. Mm-hmm. And she basically went in straight through the top of my head to the base of the third ventricle to create a path, one, to drain the fluid that had been accumulated. So the spinal fluid in my brain was not moving. And that was what was causing the pressure in my brain to impact my walking, impact my balance, and impact my cognitive thinking, because this kind of started around April and now we're into October. So we're almost 9 months later, 7 months later. And it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And she said that, we don't know what kind of recovery we'll get. I don't know how much damage is there. And I don't know how quickly it'll come back. If it'll come back, we just have to we just see what happens. So,
yeah, and I'll never forget seeing you at our Gala for Life, that, several months after that all began to transpire, and you were pretty much at the worst that I had ever seen you. You were kind of confined to a wheelchair at that point, mm-hmm. not even able to really walk up any kind of stairs at the Gala. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those moments where, you were trying to figure out, what does the rest of my life look like?
Yeah. In September, I kind of surrendered to the Lord, and I said, okay, Lord, if this is what you have for me, okay, but I don't like it. I told him I didn't like it. Mm-hmm. But I said, if this is what you have, then, and started really thinking about, how do you learn to live like this? Mm-hmm. Bless my husband's heart. He, for 7-8 months, did it all. Mm-hmm. Grocery shopped, cleaned, laundry, everything, because I really was not able to do much because I just couldn't stand up very long or get from point A to point B very easily.
So for the listening audience who is now thinking to themselves, okay, she's on a podcast for Alternatives Pregnancy Center and we're talking about brain surgery. Let's tie this together a little bit. In January, I said some very distinct words to you prior to all this happening. Mm-hmm. What did I say?
You said, just make sure we want to make sure this is what's in your heart and what you feel God has for you, because I will let you know that there is a lot of spiritual warfare that goes on at Alternatives because of what we're doing, because we're trying to save babies' lives, and the enemy doesn't like that. And that you had seen story after story after story of people here, either themselves or family members, where the enemy had gotten in and just done a lot of damage. So we started thinking about that, right, when that was all going on. And but I think that, to back up, so I ended up having surgery on November 4th last year, so it's just been 1 year roughly. And the doctor, she told Dave after surgery, we'll just have to watch and see how that goes. We don't know if she'll get full function back, how long it'll take, all the things. So, and it was just an absolute miracle, because I woke up the next morning and I was perfectly fine. And I've thought about probably even more amazing to my husband, who had watched this deterioration go on day after day after day, and mm-hmm. him probably keeping a pretty stiff upper lip to try to hold me up. But what was his heart feeling when he saw that? Because he walked into the hospital. Well, I called him that morning. They brought me some coffee, and it was terrible. You think, how can you mess up a cup of coffee, right? But they brought me this coffee in the hospital, and it was just awful. So I had this darling nurse. She was a new believer, so it was such a God thing, and I was her only patient that day. And And she said, well, you can call your husband and he can bring you some coffee. So she gave me the phone and I called, and I just kind of my normal self. I'm like, hi. And he said later, he's like, I didn't know who I was even talking to on the phone. It was just like mind blowing to him. Yeah. And then when he got to the hospital, we were coming back from kind of a walk around the floor. I was using a walker at the time, and he was just stood there and he just looked at me and had tears in his eyes. So yeah, here we go. Yeah, he was just as amazed as I was, and the doctor was blown away. And I've been very clear with her that it was, I believe that she's the miracle that God brought. He brought me a miracle through her hands, through her skill, through her ability. And then that really proved to us when we had heard her name twice in the process of 7 months that this is who God wanted me to be with for care. But when you wind all the way back to when you and I first met and the tour, I believe it's all God, because had I not been on our board, I was new on our board, and I probably not something I would have ever chosen to do. I was nominated to be on our board and then was elected. But I felt like God, I didn't feel like it was a hard no. I'm like, okay, I had just stepped off of women's ministry leadership about 4 or 5 months earlier, because I really felt like God had something else coming, but I didn't know what that was. And that was January, and then I got the call that I had been nominated in May for the board. But it's always so awesome to watch, wind back and see how God worked. But because I was put on the board and then came for a tour, it's all his plan for what he had for me to be here today in the capacity that I'm in. Mm-hmm. But you came to visit me the week after my surgery, and you tell me. It was remember.
A mind-blowing moment. When I didn't expect you, first off, a week after brain surgery, to get up and actually answer the door, especially since the last time I saw you, you were in a wheelchair. And I watched you on the other side of your glass front door, walk to the door and open the door, and it was like nothing was ever wrong with you. And we both stood there and had an incredible moment of just giving praises to God for his miraculous healing in your life.
Yeah. And I think I told you somewhere in that week from the surgery to when you came, I just heard God clearly tell me, I've healed you, now go serve me at Alternatives Pregnancy Center.
Yeah, and here we are.
And he used that whole time, I think, not that I was hanging onto the money wheel, but, just it's a process. You can't work in corporate America for 30 plus years. And, I was in sales and sales management. You can't do all that and just, maybe other people could, but I was struggling with it. But he took the desire and the taste and everything away from me for what I had been doing for all those years. And with zero worry for Dave and I. Neither one of us had any concerns. We just, let's go. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I ended up here.
Yeah, and you've been here it'll be a year.
A year in March. I started March 1st was when I came on staff.
That's unbelievable what God has done in and through your life. And you've been such a blessing, and almost like Aaron in the Old Testament, holding up my arms, being a part with me in this ministry. Mm-hmm. And I'm so thankful for you, and I'm so thankful for just your partnership and your expertise and your years of professional service in corporate America, and what that brings to Alternatives Pregnancy Center now.
Thank you.
And with your abortion experience, this had, as you mentioned, kind of a tender spot in your heart. And will you speak just briefly to the abortion recovery program that we have and what you recently experienced as you were a part of that?
Mm-hmm, sure. We have post-abortive care classes here, as you know. And, it's our desire here to love on women no matter what. Women will walk out the door and potentially still choose abortion, but we tell them we still love you. We want you to come back. We're here for you no matter what it is that you need. And that's one of the many things I love about Alternatives is we love these women. Our medical team loves on these women very, very holistically. We're here for all aspects of her life. And even, of course, we want every woman to choose life, but we also know that's not the reality. There are going to be women that don't choose life. But we want to be here for the healing afterwards. So I don't remember a lot about my abortion experience. It was with my ex-husband. He and I were married for 26 years. I remember the day. I remember the experience. I remember the sounds. I remember I cried. I remember I was looking at him, and he had tears going down his face. But I was 19, and I was not a believer at the time. And he said to me that if we had a baby right now, it would ruin our lives. Which, is hard to say now, that I walk with the Lord, but I didn't know any better, like some of the women that come in here. But I feel like I've allowed God to heal me, and I've reconciled that with him. And kind of how I found confirmation of that is we had a class that just ended about 3 or 4 months ago that I decided I would take myself, because I've never had any specific abortion recovery healing. So I was in this class. There were about 7 of us. Just to show you how long those potential regrets or shame can hang on, you had the most recent gal was about 6-7 months ago that she had an abortion, and the farthest out was a woman who had abortion even longer than me, 50 years ago. And a believer, so it's not like she wasn't, but for whatever reason she was still holding on to shame and guilt and sorrow and whatnot. But after going through a few of the classes, I think I talked to you about it, and Nicole, who leads our classes. I didn't feel like I could answer the questions, because the questions were very specific and good ones, but to what you're going through, what you're feeling, the difficulties you're having, the shame you're feeling, all the things. And I wasn't feeling any of that. And then I felt kind of bad. I'm like, well, am I just afraid and I don't want to answer these questions, and I do have feelings and I'm trying to hide them? And I prayed a lot about it, and I think that it wasn't that. I think it was that I had come to a place with the Lord that I was okay, and I wasn't suffering from those things. I have 2 beautiful daughters, and I thought about it when they were both born. It crossed my mind, but I wasn't a believer with either one of them when they were born. Where it really hit me is when my oldest daughter, Erin, had her first child, Nash, who's now almost 6. That's when it hit me, because that was 6 years ago. And I've been walking with the Lord for about 16 years. So I'll never forget just crying like a baby in the shower one morning after he was born, because that's when it hit me that this is what I did. And maybe that's where I let go of some of whatever it was, and if you're not a believer, you're not going to, those thoughts or those feelings are not going to impact you the same as if you are a believer and you understand the sanctity of human life, and that every baby that God creates has a purpose and is special. So I think that's where, when Nash was born, that's where that reality really hit my heart. So I think that maybe some of my healing just quite simply happened right there, and talking to God about that after I saw him, because I was in the delivery room when he was born. And it's, it's incredibly special. So anyway, I think it's an incredibly great class. My goal is to hopefully get involved in helping Nicole lead that. That's a desire that I have, and we're having some conversation around that. And is that a way that I can give back and help love on women? Because I really wanted to stay in the class kind of from that aspect, and we all, connected really well. And I wanted to, but I felt bad because I can't stay and not do the work, So we just kind of put that on the burner and said, we'll talk about that potentially is the next time that we have one of those classes pulled together.
Yeah. Well, praise God for your healing, and praise God that he has mended those areas of your life. And that's what he does. He's all about taking just the brokenness in our lives and bringing restoration and healing out of it, and pulling us out of the guilt and the shame, and restoring us to honor through Christ alone, for sure. Thank you for sharing all of that with us, and appreciate you so much and what you bring to this ministry.
Thank you.
And for our listening audience who is tuning in right now, we're just grateful for your following, and grateful for the opportunity to just listen to women's stories and the different stories that connect each of them to our ministry. Lisa, thank you so much for being a part of our Alternatives Pregnancy Center podcast. And one thing I love about your story is that I think many people think that those who are a part of our ministry are not just pro-life, but we have this staunch stance on being pro-life. And what many people don't understand is that a lot of the volunteers and staff that work as a part of our ministry have experienced abortion for themselves. We have an OBGYN doctor who was an abortionist at one point, and it just shows how God can restore the brokenness in our lives and use it for his glory. So thank you for testifying to that, and thank you for being a part of the Alternatives Pregnancy Center team. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you've been impacted by this podcast or want to learn more about our ministry, visit alternativespc.org.